We get to continue our journey this month around this idea of building our spiritual core. So we started last week talking about what does that mean? What is our spiritual core? And you can find that talk on Facebook or on YouTube to get the little intro where we kind of talked a little bit, the basics about what that is. But I'll tell you just what we're talking about. Just like when you are taught to work out or when you read anything about fitness, you're going to hear oftentimes where you have to strengthen your core, your actual abdominal area, your core, because that helps when you're an athlete or when you're doing any kind of exercise. It helps you stabilize, it helps you, be stronger, it helps you have balance, all of these things, right? And so our spiritual core is very much the same. Every day we're doing things in the universe that is building up that core so that when something happens, we call on that core to be able to stabilize us. We use our core to walk, our physical core, right? To walk, to do all sorts of activities. And so when we build up our spiritual core, it's very much the same way. When we step into something that's uncomfortable, or we step into something that's painful, or when we step into something that's scary, we can rely on that core that's like, oh, it's got us. And so that's what we're talking about. How do we build that? How do we develop that? So when the world is in chaos, as it oftentimes is, it's not in chaos right now. It doesn't seem that way, right? Well, gas prices say something different, right? Right. When those things happen, we're ready. We're ready to be able to deal with all of life's circumstances and see the truth in who we are and the truth in what is happening in the world. So we're looking at all of this month. What I love about unity and the unity message is that it's been referred to as an adaptable spirituality or even an adaptable religion. And by that it's meant that, we have no dogma, we have no creed, we have no credo. We do have our principles, we have 5 basic principles, and we do have things that we believe in, but we don't have that sort of staunch, all of these things that you must do, that you have to do, that you have to think, that you have to be in order to be a unity truth student, in order to be a unity person. And so that makes us very different. And so by virtue of who we are and how we exist in the world and what we believe, we are flexible. In and of itself, we are changing, we are adapting all the time. And we say, when people walk in, I didn't say it this morning, but I usually say, we are positive, practical, progressive Christianity that's based on the teachings of Jesus, but we also include other spiritualities, and we value everyone where they are at on their path. That is part of what unity believes. And so that's a beautiful thing that we think about. We don't have these fundamentalistic creeds, and that oftentimes provides a little bit of a situation for us in that, we don't tell people what to believe. And oftentimes in a world that's really scary at times or seems scary or there's so much chaos or so much conflict, you want to walk into a space sometimes and just be told, what do I need to believe? How do I need to feel? How can I be safe? And so sometimes being in other spiritualities, it provides a different way to feel that. Whereas in unity, we're telling people, think for yourself. We're telling people, do the work on your own. And when I say this, I have some of the board members who are like, don't tell people that, you're not selling it. You're not selling unity right, And it's funny to say that, but that is the truth when I say this is work. This is not easy, this is work, but the blessings when you put in the time and the discipline and the work is so amazing. So we don't have that kind of thing that other spiritualities may have. But sometimes what happens, though, with unity folks and unity truth students is that our flexible truth becomes inflexible. What do I mean by that? That sometimes that thing that we think is flexible, we start to make it rigid by the things that we say or the things that we do or the things that we say unity is, when in reality, if we looked a little further, that might not be so. I stood on this platform 5 months ago, actually no, 6 months ago, when Reverend John, our former senior minister, was retiring. And at that time, he gave me these colored beads. Does anybody remember that? Oh, yeah. He gave me these colored beads. And what he said to me at that time was the wisdom that he was going to impart upon me was that I show my true colors. That's what he said to me. He said, show your true colors. This is the loving wisdom that I will leave you with. And so I took that to heart. And so I started to say, how do I want to be? Who am I? How do I want to show up? And so part of my showing up was not just about what I did and how the sermons came up. It was also about what was I giving in terms of how was I wanting to create an experience for people. And sometimes when you do things, it doesn't always land well. You know, has that ever been happened when you had the best of intentions and it just didn't land well? You made a poo-poo situation out of it, right? Anybody have that situation? Where you had best intentions but didn't turn out maybe so well. You didn't fully think about all the implications that were involved in something that you did. It's funny that Spirit will always give us opportunities to practice principle. You know, we talk about things, and once we start talking about things in this community, let's say maybe you come on a Sunday and you hear something about spiritual strength. Do you go out into the world and then you're left with, you're challenged in some ways, right? You're given the opportunity to step into that teaching. Has anyone had that happen where you leave and you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm stepping into this? It is, that's how it is, because again, we're calling on Spirit to heal us at depth when we're here. And so you'll have those opportunities to say, okay, it's here. What did you learn? It's here. How would you want to show up? It's here. Maybe you're not going to do it perfectly, but it's an opportunity for you to practice. And so for me, it's also been an opportunity to practice. You know, one of the things that I did when I thought about, okay, I was given the charge at some level, you know, part of what folks have also said to me was, we really see you as an opportunity to help diversify the congregation. We see this and this new era as an opportunity to really make this an inclusive community where everyone feels welcome. They can truly feel the unity message. And so one of the funny things that I thought about was, you know, people of color, for example, and in cultures, you know, in different cultures, they like a lot of color. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever noticed like Latin American cultures, Asian cultures, Indian cultures, a lot of adornment, a lot of colors, lots going on, yes? Not necessarily the norm in your typical American culture, right? And so I thought, what could I do? What part of my expression showed up as a lot of color on the platform? Anybody notice that? No, you guys didn't notice it at all. Right? I mean, it's not like you can look at me and see I'm loud, right? No, that doesn't come across at all. Yes. So part of that was about that. And so it was really interesting to me when I started to get feedback from people. I started to hear, and I didn't hear it from people. No one ever came to me and said, this is what I think. It would be like, well, I heard, somebody said. And so I'd hear all these messages, and so I really, it made me chuckle to hear the things folks said. So I got things like, it's too busy. It's so overwhelming, I can't even focus on what's being said. I heard, woo, it's a new age explosion up there. And my personal favorite, it's a harem. It looks like it's a harem. I'm like, ooh. I won't go to that one, but anyway. So we have all of these things that are said, and I realized I could be stuck in being hurt about it. I could be stuck in thinking that my expression of my ministry was not supported. But what I realized in all of that is that we're different people. We resonate with different things. And sometimes the things that we have attachments to become so much a part of us that we don't always realize that we're not willing to let them go. And I say that as part of my journey as well, because my journey has been this. Reverend John left me with this: show your true colors, but sometimes they don't have to be that loud, right? Sometimes subtlety can also go over. And so it's been this journey for me about this idea. The development of the core is also about balance. We're going to be talking about that in the weeks to come. But how do you balance that? How to be able to share who you are, but also understand there has to be flexibility in how we share together. I remembered, as all of this was coming up, a movie, and I don't know if you all would have even seen it, but it's in the 80s or 90s. It's called Fools Rush In, with Salma Hayek and Luke Perry. Does anybody remember that movie? I see a couple of head nods. So I'll give you a quick synopsis of the story. The story is Salma Hayek is, I think, a bartender, and Luke Perry is this really button-up, conservative guy. He's a businessman. They meet, things happen, and they end up getting together. To make a really long story short, they get together, and they move in. She moves in with him. One day, he comes home from work. He opens the door, and she greets him with this Chihuahua dog, okay? Not his dog. And y'all know what Chihuahuas do. They're barky and loud, right? Mexican Chihuahua dog. Oh, by the way, she plays a Mexican character in the movie. So she's greeting him with this Mexican Chihuahua doll, and then he starts looking around his home, and it's like color everywhere. He had a black and white kind of gray scheme, and all of a sudden there's color everywhere. And the whole family, Mexican family, is in the kitchen, and they're cooking, and they're loud, and they're playing music, and then all of a sudden he turns, and there's a huge crucifix of Jesus on the wall. Does anybody remember that scene? And he's flipping out, like, what just happened here? And I realized to myself in that moment, I Mexicaned everybody in the congregation. I Mexicaned all over you guys with my color and my brilliant, like, decor maybe. That doesn't mean that it was wrong. That doesn't mean that I'm not gonna do it again. That doesn't mean that made it wrong that you all flagged it, some of you. It just means that sometimes when we're traveling on this journey together, we have to strike that flexibility. We have to be able to do that give and take with each other so that we can continue on this road. Because here's the truth of this story. Here's why I tell you this story. Because part of what we as a community in this journey have to do is practice with these little things. Because ultimately they are little things, right? We're not talking about me saying something horrifically wrong about, whatever, about unity or something major. These are little things, but these are also where the spiritual rubber hits the road, where we're called as a community to be self-reflexive and to really think about what matters and to think about how do we continue on this journey together. Because here's the truth. These little things are building up our spiritual core. Because there's bigger issues that we may face or have to face that will allow us to start dipping our toe in these ways about how do we engage difference? How do we engage the way we think different things? Because this is part of something bigger. These instances will allow us to practice when the bigger things come up. We haven't even talked about things like, what do we think about vaccines? What do we think about politics? What do we think about what's happening in the world? These are issues that people say, well, they're political, we don't deal with them in church. Maybe that's true, and I think part of it is true. But everything around us is political, and so we step into these situations to practice as a community so that we have the spiritual muscles to be able to hold spiritually all of these things when they come up right here or when they come up in your family. Do they come up at the dinner table in your family when you maybe have different political views? I've heard so many congregants say to me that their families don't share their views on race. In fact, they have shared with me, oftentimes it is excruciating sometimes being in family settings where they have to hear racist talk. And it's hard, right? This is hard stuff. But again, this is where we're building, step by step, with all of these things that seem like they don't matter, but they do. So let's not look at them in that way, that they don't matter, because they all do. This is one story that I share with you, one situation, but it is a practice point, because it happens all the time. So we have to ask ourselves then, how do we as a Unity community, how do we as spiritual beings, how do we as Unity Truth students become adaptable, malleable, changeable, as supposedly our Unity principles allow that expansiveness for, right? So we ask that in every situation as we move forward this month together, asking the question, how can we be flexible? So I'd like to move us into a time of meditation where we can practice this from a meditation perspective. How we become flexible. Thank you, David. How do we become flexible? How do we deal with these things? Jesus' ministry was all about flexibility. Let's think about this. He preached wherever. He didn't say, I have to preach in a certain place. I don't have to preach in this sort of way. He preached wherever their people were. He preached in a way that was flexible of how he would show things, whether it was through healings or parables. There was all of that in his ministry about being flexible, not just saying, I'm flexible. Does anybody remember he healed on the Sabbath? And that was a big no-no, because folks were stuck in that rigidity where you could only do things this way or that way or on this day. And so we find that example in the way shower of unity. We call Jesus our way shower because we're learning from the example of Jesus and Jesus' life and his ministry about what that meant, that we become adaptable and that we allow for the varied expressions of spirit. We allow and hold all of that in love. So let's take that into a time of meditation. I invite you all to close your eyes. And if you have not closed them before in meditation, maybe you practice that flexibility here today to close your eyes. Close your eyes so that the outer eye may open. That outer eye closes so the inner eye may open. The inner eye is opening up to be able to see. We open ourselves up to see and be the presence, to think the presence, to speak the presence, to act as presence. We are called, each of us are called into this iteration of life to be the Christ expressing. And so we open ourselves up to that understanding, to that knowing. We just make a deep connection, some deep roots into that right now, and allow that to rise within our being. I am the Christ's presence. I am the Christ's presence of flexibility. I am the Christ's presence that allows. I am the Christ's presence that speaks my truth. I am the Christ's presence that honors the truth of others. And so we ask ourselves here today, as we move into a period of silence, Call on your divine wisdom, your inner guide, your spiritual core, the allness, the eternal, the God of your understanding, to show you how and where might you be inflexible. Where in your life might there be rigidity that needs softening? Is it in your romantic relationship, in your family, at your job, with the world, in your spiritual community? How might you become flexible, malleable, changeable? How might you feel safe and secure to allow for that flexibility? Hold that question and that wisdom in the silence. Today we invoke that flexibility. We invoke our spiritual strength. We invoke that deep spiritual core, and we claim it as good, and we claim it as God, and we see it guiding us, stabilizing us, balancing us, and allowing us to fully be the expressions of oneness. You may open your eyes and come back, shaking off that meditation time, taking some beautiful deep breaths, coming back. And as we conclude, I just again reiterate this idea. Unity is an adaptable spirituality. It is creedless. It is open-ended. It is flexible. And this allows us to shift. Here's a really cool thing about unity, is that it allows us to shift in a way that others might not be able to. When things are happening in the world, it allows us to shift to a higher perspective, to a new perspective, to a deeper perspective. I want to share with you in closing a quote from Unity magazine in 1908. And it says, "There is a realm of mind where pure truth exists without the alloy of human opinion. When man is untrampled in thought and stimulated by an unusual fervor along certain lines, he rises to this realm and he transcends human rules in doing things of the Spirit. No man can be led of the Spirit who has fixed ideas of religion. There must be the greatest flexibility of mind in order to adjust oneself to the many-sided aspects of God, of being. God is like a diamond flashing many faces into the eye of the beholder." I leave you with that. And by the way, the ending of the movie, spoiler alert, they break up because of all of these differences. But guess what? As Hollywood does, they get back together. And they even eat Grace Papaya's hot dogs. Does anybody know about Grace Papaya's hot dogs? Best hot dogs in New York. So all is well when we move into this deeper realm of living and moving and breathing. So flexibility, like a muscle, we build here today, we continue to build this month, and we build together. And so it is, and so we let it be.